This is Part 2 Episode 166. Although in the midst and expense of boundless white, those purplish gold rays gave off an aloof and remote feel, and in the confrontation, none of them seemed really able to suppress the other. It only came down to a continuous clash. This was Haoyue's power, and was the divine throne of eternity and creation rejecting that. Long Haochen was secretly overwhelmed with shock. If things were really so, what kind of choice would that come down for him to? Deep inside, Long Haochen started to struggle. Haoyue was his companion, a bloodbound companion. Discarding Haoyue would come down to causing his death. And the divine throne was a must in his eyes, as the Union's chairman and unprecedented knight of ultimate gifts. Being unable to gain the divine throne's approval would be a major blow to both his growth and prestige within the Union. Out of the two, which one to choose? Furthermore, there was not only that purplish golden ray's rejection, but also another dark gold-colored gloss appeared within that golden glow. Compared to the purplish gold radiance, this dark gold radiance was far less eye-catching, but it similarly connected to the golden light originating from Long Haochen himself. And from its appearance, its intensity was not much less than the purplish golden light. The purplish gold originating from Haoyue was part of the blood connection between them, a bloodline's power. But what was this dark gold? If that was also a bloodline's power, since when could it be that he had it? This dark gold was not representative of darkness, but it also gave off a feeling of extreme power. Moreover, a power that mainly came from the depths of Long Haochen's soul, in other words, intricately related to his very soul force. Long Haochen had never had an irresolute character, and thus made up his choice after short considerations. He chose Haoyue. If a choice had to be made between the divine throne of eternity and creation and Haoyue, he would still choose the latter. Haoyue was not only his mount companion, but a good brother to Haochen. Even if the divine throne of eternity and creation was a supra-divine tool, that was still no more than a divine tool. When weighing the balance between a brother or a divine tool, the choice was not difficult at all in Haochen's mind. Even if that meant that he would get no divine throne, he would absolutely not give up on Haoyue. In over 10 years, he had personally seen Haoyue's growth bit after bit, during which time Haoyue saved his life not only once or twice. They depended on each other, and helped each other to reach their current achievements. Haoyue was his good brother, good companion, and would in no circumstances discard Haochen. This firm belief suddenly started to fluctuate in the midst of this land of fantasy. That purplish gold radiance enlarged, and although its volume was no match for the white light, its aura of loftiness and pride became even more domineering. Even the dark gold radiance followed suit, as if following Long Haochen's state of mind, without any autonomous features of its own. Under Long Haochen's firm belief, it appeared especially tenacious, supporting Haoyue in resisting the white light. What should be a little clash became a mutual resistance. And it seemed that Haochen was drawing further and further from the divine throne of eternity and creation. Long Xingyu's anxiety became more and more intense. After 2 hours passed, Long Haochen's trial had still yet to begin. After such a long time, even if it had already started, then perhaps he. For a moment, Long Xingyu's heart became a total mess. Furthermore, he came to notice that the white light drifting from the statue representing divine throne of eternity and creation was getting more and more intense, yet faintly gave off an invading feel. And on Long Haochen's forehead, 9 lines of purplish gold came to view, faintly giving off an aura of devastation, as if withstanding that divine throne of eternity and creation. Haochen, Haochen, just what are you doing? But no matter how worried Long Xingyu was, there was nothing he could do at all. Earning a divine throne's approval could only be done by one's own efforts, so he could only stand there looking on in anxiety. Time passed very fast, and in a blink of an eye, it had already been 1 day. Han Yu and Zhong Fengfeng's trials were unknown, but contrariwise Long Xingyu was at ease for them, as after one would get taken into a divine throne's trial, the longer it lasted, the higher their chances. As for Long Haochen, maybe he no longer had an opportunity. Long Xingyu actually had already resolved himself, and as time passed, the purplish gold color expending from Long Haochen's forehead and confronting the divine throne of eternity and creation started to get more and more intense. Although that purplish golden radiance could amazingly stand its ground against the divine throne of eternity and creation, this also meant that it was only becoming harder for Long Haochen to gain the acknowledgement of the divine throne in front of him. His heart of eternity was pulsing quietly, and the holy aura dispersed around him was very clean. That kind of purity even brought continuous sensations of insight to Long Xingyu, who was staying nearby. Only, his too nervous self had no thoughts of grasping these insights. If that won't do, just end it. When Long Haochen would break through the second rank of ninth step to the third, there should be a chance. Long Xingyu gasped secretly, unaware of why Long Haochen was supporting that purplish-golden radiance with such dedication. Based on his own experience, should Long Haochen just consent to discard that purplish-gold radiance's power, the Divine Throne's power would be released, thus initiating Long Haochen's trial. In the time of 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, Long Haochen still didn't move in the least, resisting again and again. By chance, that was only his aura and thoughts resisting, and not spiritual energy. Otherwise, given the folklore behind the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation, although Long Haochen's cultivation was not weak, that was still not enough for him to resist in any way. Long Haochen felt he was in a special mode. These 3 days were not wasted. In his mind, he felt his soul continuously sublimating in the confrontation, as that aura of dark gold blended in, continuously integrating itself into his soul. This was a wonderful feeling, just like when he had originally undergone his awakening of light. Only, it didn't give off that kind of feeling of connection with the goddess of light. Long Haochen knew that perhaps there was no way he would obtain acknowledgement from the Divine Throne, but his soul could make an evolution, thus achieving progress in the training of soul force, which was an area no one had ever studied. The Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation had broad and boundless power. Appearing all-embracing, it was yet unmatchably imposing. Long Haochen's ultimate light god physique scouted its moodiness, and twined along it, exploring it. This was the first trial the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation was giving him. But against all expectations, in the process of this trial, that dark gold radiance was affected by Haoyue and Long Haochen's beings. Long Haochen's faith never wavered, but the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation seemed to bring continuous changes to his senses. At the start, the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation gave off a feeling of total inhibition, engulfing intentions. It was as if all the impurities outside the light within Long Haochen's body was getting dispelled, but as time passed, these intentions quietly began to shift, as Long Haochen himself was not in the least aware of it. In front of the boundless presence of the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation, Haoyue still did not shrink back at all. No matter how the boundless power came in, Haoyue kept his proud heads lifted, with an air of nobility and coldness, and full of a terrifying destructiveness. Both parties confronted each other, with none of the two parties able to cope with the other one. If someone truly knew about the origins of the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation, and were to witness this scene, that person would certainly be in extreme shock. Such a pure clash of intentions was simply reaching a whole other plane, as they were both trying to demonstrate their lordship to each other. When confronting the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation, even Long Haochen's light god physique was completely suppressed, to the extent that the dark golden force in his body and soul were gradually disappearing. This was a gap of the highest level. But Haoyue was not the same. His power seemed in no way inferior to the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation's. It was at no disadvantage from beginning to end in the mutual clashes, but was similarly unable to deal with the throne's intent. The strife unexpectedly came to a gradual compromise. Haoyue's purplish gold gradually shrunk within the parts of light from Long Haochen's body, and the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation's white light was less insistent. Within Long Haochen's throbbing heart of eternity, the divine pellet born from his breakthrough to the 9th step had quietly become colored purplish gold. This color symbolizes that bloodline force of Haoyue's, completely integrated into his spiritual pellet. As the heart of eternity kept pulsing, this force seemed to be transmitted over and over to him. A soft white color gradually filled Long Haochen's whole body, and on the 4th day of his confrontation with the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation, Haochen's body disappeared in a flash of white light. Long Xingyu had originally given up all hope, so his son's sudden breakthrough caused him a terrible fright. These 4 days of standing guard got him into a tired state, his body swaying slightly as his eyes grew heavy at once. Can Haochen succeed? He could get evaluated only after a whole 4 days, making him an unprecedented case among all holy knights attempting to receive a divine throne. All the geniuses that had ever come for that purpose had all without exception failed. Long Xingyu took a deep breath, secretly sighing in relief for his son. Wishing you success. He knew clearly that, failing to obtain the Divine Throne of Eternity and Creation's approval would be an enormous blow for Long Haochen. He was already on the spotlight as the union's chairman, but being so young, proving himself by displaying sufficient strength was a must for him to gain a higher approval. The status as Divine Knight was undoubtedly the best persuasive force, and in contrast, being unsuccessful would only mean his talent and ability were not enough to gain a Divine Throne's approval. This would raise doubts in a large majority of the people. No matter how worried Long Xingyu was, all he could now do was pray. The trial for the divine throne of eternity and creation had formerly been failed and narrated to Houchen by Yang Haoyu, so whether Long Houchen could succeed would now only depend on himself. The instant the white light from the divine throne of eternity and creation wrapped around Long Houchen, he woke up from his land of fantasy. As the previous pressure disappeared entirely, he felt like his body was soaked in warm water, causing an indescribable feeling of coziness. His tempered soul gained the best rest through this feeling, as if melting into his body, as it entered a short state of blankness and slumber. After some time passed, the surroundings grew back to getting clearer. A peaceful feeling sobered Long Houchen, waking him up. As a clear chirping sound spreading to his ears, Houchen gradually came back to his senses. With shock, he found himself in a forest, surrounded with tall trees with man-sized shrubs all around. What is this place? Long Houchen looked all around with a feeling of puzzlement. The coziness in his body maintained his body in its peak state, and the progress of his soul sharply amplified his perception. A rich vitality could be sensed all around. The most primitive nature, devoid of the slightest feeling of threat, surrounded them. A boundless aura of life gently poured itself into his senses. Long Houchen had an extremely firm willpower, and naturally wouldn't suddenly lose himself due to the changes in the environment. After shortly gazing coldly at the surroundings, his frame of mind returned to normal as well. In a flash of light, the 6 wings on his back spread out as he attempted to communicate with Haoyu. The connection was achieved without a doubt, but to his surprise, Haoyu had actually rejected his summon for the very first time, and moreover sent emotions of good luck wishes into his mind. Is he encouraging me to take the trial on my own? Just what could the trial of the divine throne of eternity and creation be? In this pure great nature, Long Houchen at least did not have the slightest idea as of now. As such, he thought he may as well just look around. Having such thoughts, he flapped the wings on his back, his body drifted upwards, and flying off a treetop in the blink of an eye, rose to the skies. Flying this way, Long Houchen felt shock as he discovered an incredibly magnificent scenery unfolding in front of him. When gazing into the distance, everything seemed all green. Those sky-tall trees that had been growing for who knows how long occupied all the space. Not the slightest bit of mud or rock came into sight, only an endless vegetation which spread out the distance, giving off the same feeling as when watching an ocean. Long Houchen flapped his wings, propelling himself forward at a slow speed, as his senses stretched out, sensing everything down below. Since the divine throne of eternity and creation had let him in, his trial should have already started. He did not know whether he would be able to complete it or not, but knew that he was already giving his utmost. As he flew forward, a screech spread suddenly to his senses. Given Long Houchen's current cultivation prospects, there should normally be no movement that could possibly escape his scouting in a range of 50 kilometers. That screech sounded human, yet seemed to contain a feeling of absolute terror. Long Houchen almost unconsciously flapped the 6 wings on his back. His flying speed was originally able to reach an already extremely terrifying level, adding to that the boost of lightspeed flash made him cross a stretch of 5 kilometers in the blink of an eye, to find accurately the origin of the screeching sound. Right when he was on the verge of finding his target, he happened to notice a white figure below a treetop, heading for his direction. Without giving him the time to identify the white figure, another immense figure came rushing out, and countless tree leaves fell, as its terrifying oppressive presence forced a choking feeling into Long Houchen. What kind of a creature could that be? All that came to sight was a bare upper body across the treetops, before disappearing from Long Houchen's line of sight, appearing just like a somber peak coming from the thickets. Those thick hands appeared like water jars, forming fists with their immense palms, matching even giant hammers. Such a pair of palms rushed out at that white figure in front of him, which became entrapped within in the blink of an eye. This very instant, all the surroundings suddenly became static. Even that white figure that was ejected to the sky, as well as the terrifying magical beast in pursuit of her, stopped in midair. Long Houchen heard a totally emotionless voice spreading to him, "The trial has started. Rescue the female human Cece, and protect her. The trial will terminate upon failure." This voice came very fast, and in the meantime, Long Houchen took the chance to take a look at the girl clad fully in white. Right now, her long black hair was in a total mess, her gaze full of terror. But it didn't change the fact she had a stunning figure, looking in her 20s, her appearance actually bearing some resemblance with Kias. The sound came to an end, and the surroundings that had came to a stop suddenly resumed their movement. That white-clad girl Cece headed toward Long Houchen's side in a flash, as that pair of extremely terrifying hands came straight at her, with Long Houchen right in the middle. Facing such a situation, Long Houchen didn't panic in the slightest. Since the trial of the divine throne of eternity and creation had already gotten started, and although the specifics were somewhat different from the starry sky divine Night Yang Haoyu stories, the global situation was still quite a bit similar. Some time back, in Holy City, Yang Haoyue had narrated to him some specific details regarding the trial given by the divine throne of eternity and creation. Yang Haoyu had told him that the trial was not just a simple battle, but a series of tests. On the premise of being a qualified holy knight, only when the divine throne of eternity and creation gives its approval will the tested person be enabled to enter its world to undergo the trial. The trial was formed of a series of missions, and only by completing all of them would one have the possibility of gaining the approval of the divine throne of eternity and creation. As for the missions involved, according to the records of the Night Temple's elders and Yang Haoyu's personal experience, each trial differed from every other, but the common part was that each time involved a series of missions, chained each to the others and not allowing of the slightest mistake, as one would be followed by the trial's failure, getting the one involved transported back. All Yang Haoyu's attempts had ended in failure. His warning to Long Haochen was that during the trial given by this divine throne of eternity and creation, the biggest challenge was absolutely not the test of strength, but the test of heart and humanly attributes. His two failures were on this aspect. And, the last time was when he was the closest to that point, only to be finally informed by the divine throne of eternity and creation that his light was not pure enough, and had created too many spiritual bonds. Thus he would be rejected forever. These spiritual bonds referred to the starry sky mythological beast. But back then, after Yang Haoyu had pondered over and over again, he still chose not to forsake the starry sky mythological beast. Not only were the two of them deeply attached to each other, even if he had forsaken the starry sky mythological beast, that would perhaps only make the final trial even harder to complete. He told Long Haochen to learn from him, not to compromise in his qualifications in the initial determinations, but insist in showing all he has. Back then, maybe Yang had not been persevering enough, because after rejecting him in the end, the divine throne of eternity and creation had told him, if you don't even have the conviction to insist, how can you even gain approval and reach terms? This, in addition, was the reason why Long Haochen had not moved in the slightest in those previous 4 days, and had allowed the divine throne of eternity and creation to exert such an immense pressure without batting an eye. By insisting on showing his own dedication, as expected, the divine throne was really the compromising side. Although Haoyue had also compromised on this aspect, the fact that Haoyue's bloodline force within Haochen's body did not stop the trial from getting started implied that the divine throne of eternity and creation did not necessarily require a body of absolute purity. These thoughts only briefly flashed through Long Haochen's mind, as a multicolored gold spread out in front of him, forming an immense curtain of light to block the bash from that pair of immense hands. With a large bang, Long Haochen felt as if smashed by a mountain. His body was propelled through the air, and although he did not sustain wounds, his heart of eternity instantly increased its throbbing speed by 3-fold. While his body was blasted back, his right hand brushed through the air at his side, just so as to sweep across that girl's waist, and carried her away with him in the midst of a screech. In the meantime, the body landed down in the forest below, and because that massive figure was already completely exposed above the treetop, Long Haochen understood that dealing with it in the air was no wise choice. This was a kind of monster resembling an gorilla. Only, it had a pair of immense wings grown on its back. Its thick and solid body measured over 20 meters, and its shoulders were over 10 meters broad. This was also why he had brought such immense shock to Long Haochen before. Those terrifyingly thick hands were its absolute best weapons. His dark gold hairs were even a match for armors of epic tier. As its fierce bloody red-colored eyes gazed at Long Haochen, 2 blood-colored lights shot out from his eyes, heading straight for Long Haochen. The multicolored golden curtain vanished for a slight moment before it shrank for a bit, protecting Long Haochen and the white-clad girl Cece in its midst. A terrible scorching feeling of burns instantly spread to the divine snail shield of sun and moon, as a vast area of the surrounding shrubs turned into ashes. The tyrannical impact force used up a large amount of Long Haochen's spiritual energy, and furthermore it immediately pushed his body away into the woods. What powerful strength! This immense gorilla's attack force caused Long Haochen deep shock. He even bore some doubts toward Yang Haoyu's judgment. Didn't he say that in the trial of the divine throne of eternity and creation, the opponent wouldn't be too strong? But, this gorilla. From these two collisions, Long Haochen could clearly confirm that this was a magical beast of the 10th rank, and not an ordinary one. This offensive power proved a spiritual energy over 200,000, and more terrifyingly, its immense physical power in no way fell short of its spiritual energy. A figure flashed as Long Haochen returned into the woods, and the gorilla appeared out of nowhere, those thick forest trees breaking one after another, appearing like frail chopsticks. The gorilla's pair of giant palms formed a fist, directly smashing toward Long Houchen. As these fists smashed down, an intense red light surfaced atop Houchen. The strong fire essence even caused the air to twist. Long Houchen knew that he couldn't afford to remain in such a passive position, otherwise his body's tiredness would only increase. While thinking so, he flung his right hand backward with strength, and shouted out, "Just leave first." Battling with a person on his back undoubtedly greatly affected his battle performance. While throwing CC from his back, he went to face off against the gorilla's two descending hands. Two divine swords instantly appeared in Long Houchen's hands. The aria of the goddess of light pointed to the sky, and on Long Houchen's back an immense golden figure rose, Light God's Descent. A boundless sword intent spread through a large beam in the sky, rushing straight toward the gorilla's wrists. In the meantime, Blue Rain, Hibiscus of Light, was also waved forward, and a 3-meter-long golden sword struck through, aiming to send the gorilla's head flying. In his understanding of sword intent, Long Houchen's current prowess simply reached number 1 of the continent. Relying on his sword intent's might, he had defeated countless enemies above him in cultivation. The terror of sword intent lay in its perfect integration of the sword's soul and power. In particular, after Long Houchen's soul's promotion, no matter whether in perception or global strength, he had made some progress. With a sonorous bang, the sword intent expelled from the aria of the goddess of light hit the gorilla's wrist, although the attack STLL kept going. Only, the latter burst out with a painful cry. In the meantime, its eyes once again shot out 2 red streaks of light, crushing Houchen's sword beam. Long Houchen's figure flashed, his spiritual cavities avoiding the gorilla's fists. However, he had still underestimated this gorilla's strength. With a large explosion in the air, its fists smashed onto the ground, and terrifying earthquakes instantly pounded against Long Houchen's body, causing it to be shot away like a little rock. A severe vibrating force caused the internal spiritual energy within Long Houchen's body to stagnate, his head filling with instant dizziness. This actually even carried seismic waves-like effects. Long Houchen was a bit dumbfounded, but his fighting experience proved its worth, as the heart of eternity within his chest throbbed rapidly. Pushing his hands onto each other, the 2 divine swords made one, turning into the sword of life and creation. After the gorilla's fists pounded a deep hole into the ground, its massive body suddenly jumped out, rushing straight toward Long Houchen. A terrifying flame surged out from its body, appearing gold-red in color. The red-hot streams of air emanating from it turned a large area of the surrounding plants into ashes. Right this instant, an ice-blue-colored water dragon suddenly came out, heading at the gorilla, and simply intercepting it in midair. The water dragon and the flame emanating from the gorilla caused bursts of white mist, and as the gorilla's body was restricted, its snarls gained even more in fierceness. Long Houchen was slightly distracted. He had made an appropriate response, and was the one benefiting the most from this adjustment period. Turning his head, he caught sight of the young girl Cece waving an ice-blue staff and continuously chanting. Catching his glance, she responded with a light nod. Long Houchen also lowered his head toward her, and immediately rushed out. Previously, all his sword intent did to the gorilla was to leave a mark on its wrists. This gorilla's has formed the greatest armor, and it had astonishing defense. In strength, this gorilla didn't utilize the power of his domain, but its ability was absolutely describable as terrifying. Both hands grasping into the sword of life and creation, the golden figure behind Long Houchen's back turned even more brilliant. An intense gold instantly filled the air, spreading to the surroundings as it formed Light God domain. In absolute power, that gorilla's physical prowess added to his spiritual energy placed him completely above Long Houchen. Only by relying on the domain's force could he stand a chance against the gorilla. Upon use of the Light God domain, Long Houchen shockingly found out that his domain had made considerable progress. This improvement stemmed from his control of the domain. It went from something originally somewhat hard to control to a relaxed feat. His perception of all light became many times higher than before. In this world full of light essence, light was in no way lacking. The pure light essence, under the appeal of the Light God domain, immediately gushed toward Long Houchen like a river. A dim smile surfaced on his face, and while the Light God domain was in the midst of expanding, it encompassed Cece as well as that gorilla. Cece found out with shock that her own spiritual energy instantly felt as if boundless. That light of extreme purity actually changed into the water essence characteristic of her body. Her use of magic didn't change, but was turned into a dual elemental water and light magic. And moreover, There was no longer need for worry about the supply of spiritual energy. The gorilla gave off a whole other kind of feeling. It had lost track of Long Houchen and the young girl Cece, as a sticky light essence covered its body from all over. Not only did it give him a kind of slowed feeling, more alarmingly, its body's originally fiery red-colored radiance dimmed completely, and even its hairs, which should be reflecting dark gold light, had lost their color, leaving a sight of all black. Light's assimilation. All forces related to light would get sucked into the light god domain. Long Houchen's current display was a domain's most basic power, amplification and weakening. The divine sword in his hand was slowly raised. Now Long Houchen was attempting to see what boundary his domain's power could now reach. A soft multicolored light slowly came off from the united divine swords, a light full of aura of life, and, once in contact with Long Houchen's light god domain, immediately produced a chain reaction. Back in the temple's great gathering, Long Houchen's battle with young Haoyu had made use of an evolution of the light god domain. But at that time, he was totally pressured by the opponent, completely unable to exert control over his evolved domain. This time was not the same. Long Houchen was finding out with shock that this natural world full of aura of life was, after the evolution of his domain, causing its original intense gold color to disappear. All that was left was only a dim multicolored gloss, but that gloss was encompassing all the surrounding creatures. That was really a splendid feeling. All the vegetation, and even the sky and nature, all became extensions of his spiritual energy and emotional force. He controlled their very lives. Long Houchen's eyes shrank, and immediately, two trees that the nearing gorilla was approaching grew out, becoming multicolored. Their thick branches immediately engulfed that gorilla. While taking control over life, Long Houchen was in focusing deeply. This instant, he felt the bottleneck that had been limiting him getting split abruptly as the suppressed spiritual energy gushed out at once. The multicolored gold surrounding his body became even more intense and compacted in the process. Within the heart of eternity, the spiritual pellet which was turned purplish gold by Haoyue's blood force changed in the midst of the latter's throbbing, growing larger by threefold in just the blink of an eye. While cultivating one's spiritual pellet, everyone would need different methods and encounter different limitations. But, without exception, a change in the spiritual pellet would always mean a qualitative rise. Right, in this world brimming with life, after his soul's sublimation, Long Houchen had finally completed his breakthrough from the second rank, formally reaching the third rank of the ninth step. The domain's power instantly spread outwards, covering an area twice that which was occupied before his breakthrough. Controlling life, what a powerful ability that was. That gorilla had already shattered the two trees, but was completely bound by that multicolored golden light. Long Houchen had a dim smile on his face. Pointing his right hand to that gorilla, he immediately shot two multicolored light rays from his eyes, striking at that gorilla's eyes. The gorilla's body shook violently, as the surrounding multicolored light flocked toward his body. The gorilla's body kept shaking uninterruptedly, a gold-red light gushing out from its body in the meantime, rejecting the multicolored gold. However, it was just too weak compared to this post-evolution light god domain. Only a domain could stand in front of a domain. This gorilla's original strength should have been comparable to Powerhouse at the third rank of the ninth step, but its flaw lay in the lack of a domain's boost. Without such a support, it had no control over the exterior world, and in front of a domain-wielding Powerhouse, pure strength was not of too much use. The gorilla's struggle started to get weaker and weaker, and gradually, its body stopped shaking, as a look of terror gradually filled its eyes. Its massive body was shrunken gradually, starting from a small mountain's size it got smaller and smaller. A short while later, the previously unprecedented gorilla was all of a sudden under 1 meter tall, looking like a mini, yet pretty, version. Right now, it had none of its previous ferocity and its eyes filled with an expression of loss along with a tinge of grievance. Right, this was the power of control over life. Long Houchen had directly turned it back to infancy. It had lost not only its age, but also its strength. Although this was a state that could only be maintained within Houchen's domain, it was enough in the course of a battle. What threat could there be in facing such a miniaturized little guy for Long Houchen? Houchen lifted his right arm, looking at the sword of life and creation, a trace of regret revealing itself on his face. This was because this divine sword coming from the fusion of the aria of the goddess of light and blue rain, hibiscus of light, was gradually falling short of his cultivation, especially noticeable compared to the might displayed by the purplish gold Haoyue sword. He came to understand that although the sword of life and creation was a good weapon, it was in the end no genuine divine tool. In some meaning, it could only be considered a weapon of immortal grade at the nearest level to divine tool. But such a weapon was insufficient to sustain Long Houchen's future growth. This was also why he gave such importance to gaining the approval of the divine throne of eternity and creation. Going from second to third rank, and thoroughly completing his domain's first evolution, now he would no longer need to use the Sword of Life and Creation as an intermediary to achieve that again. Even so, this was a pair of divine swords he would forever treasure, even if they should only be kept for collection in the future. A soft multicolored halation was emitted from the white-clad girl Cece at Long Houchen's side. After escaping danger, Cece was in a much better mood, looking at Long Houchen with a look full of curiosity. "Hello, sir. Thank you for saving my life." Cece bowed to Long Houchen. Her bearing looked no different from the continent's mags. Now far calmer than before, that irresistible beauty resembling Seer to some extent, and moreover no inferior to the latter in her looks, gave off the feeling of brimming with life. This was a great fit with Long Houchen's post-evolution light god domain, to the extent that she also got an immense boost from the domain. From Cece's previous intervention, Long Houchen could feel that she was a mage of the 8th step. Such a mage looking only around 20 in age would definitely be a genius among geniuses in the continent. "Hello. I just happened to be here at the right time. Why has this gorilla been after you?" Long Houchen asked confusedly. Hearing this question, Cece's eyes immediately revealed an expression of sadness, and teardrops fell uncontrollably. That tear-stained peerless beauty really made a touching sight. In front of Long Houchen's firm statement, she couldn't help but shake slightly, causing in him the unconscious reaction of not daring to look at her beautiful face. "That's a house pet of the devil. That devil which has killed my clansmen, seized my family, and is chasing me to kill me. If I hadn't encountered you, I'm afraid I would." Long Houchen asked in puzzlement, "Devil? What devil?" Cece took a deep breath, explaining in sadness, "A powerful mage. Practically none of us in Eastern can even stand in front of him. And he has an absolute authority in here. All the clans here have to listen to his orders. I had accidentally found a treasure, but he found out for some unknown reason. So he sent people to my clan, requesting it. But this treasure was able to change my clan's future, so our head refused categorically. A few days later, an army came to my homeland. Not even giving the chance for a compromise, they carried out a merciless slaughter. When escaping from there, I personally saw my father, mother, and brother getting seized by their people. As it turns out, this was a world called Eastern, an ocean of green nature in a human world. Mostly two races lived there, humans and fairies. This devil the young girl Cece was referring to was the Lord of Eastern, known as Eastern's King, a half-fairy with a mixed human and fairy bloodline. In control of extremely powerful nature magic, he was the greatest powerhouse of the world Eastern. Eastern's king was like this world's ruler. He had no army, but his standing was like a king of the forest. Any being going against his wishes would ultimately get killed. His life seemed without end, having already ruled over this world for over 3,000 years. The young girl Cece didn't tell what treasure she had obtained. Long Houchen discerned some precautions in her eyes. "How should we handle this gorilla?" Long Houchen asked Cece. Cece replied hesitantly, "That's the servant of Eastern's king, his faithful lackey. No one knows how many humans and fairies have already deceased by his hand. Our Noah clan is pacifistic and doesn't wish for confrontations. If only it could have just remained weak forever, at least there wouldn't be a need for paying lives." Long Houchen furrowed his eyebrows, giving it some thought. "Let me give a try." Saying so, he slowly lifted his right hand, silently feeling the surrounding light god domain. A soft multicolored radiance started to condense in his hand, filled with the power of life as it formed a small multicolored spiral in his hand. An expression of exhaustion appeared on Long Houchen's face, as he was not only concentrating his force, but moreover borrowing power from the deep mysteries of life. If not for his soul force having made great progress, there would be no way for him to accomplish that. In a flash of multicolored light, that small spiral got flying, and landed on that miniaturized gorilla. This video will end here.